I want to start today with a warning, and I don't mean a trigger warning in the way we use it now. I mean a very old, very specific piece of advice that was given to the editor of the book we're covering today.
It's an amazing way to start, isn't it? It sets the stakes immediately.
It really does.
Yeah.
The book is an anthology called Mystics and Sceptics, edited by Namita Gokhale. And before she even started putting these stories together, she says an elderly tantric scholar pulled her aside.
And he gave her this warning that basically frames the whole project not as a literary exercise, but as a kind of dangerous journey.
Exactly. The scholar told her, when you are journeying in the Himalayas, you have to be incredibly cautious about chance encounters. Because as he put it, it is impossible to decipher if the person you're meeting is a saint, a siddha, which is a realized master, a madman.
Or a charlatan. And that's maybe the most dangerous one of all.
Right. And that ambiguity is the key, I think. In, our modern secular world, we love our categories. We have doctors, we have priests, we have criminals. We put madmen in institutions and the learned in universities.
Everything has a box. But in what the book calls the inner geography of the Himalayas, those boxes, they don't just blur, they completely collapse into one another.
The madman might be the saint.
And the charlatan might end up teaching you the most profound lesson of your life. It's this total upending of our usual way of sorting the world.
And that's the hook for me. That's why this deep dive is so fascinating.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about a mountain range today. We're not talking about geology or, plate tectonics. We are talking about the Himalayas as a state of mind.
A state of mind, exactly. A place where the boundaries between the mystical, that feeling of absolute faith, and the skeptical, the rational part of your brain that needs proof, get completely tangled up.
And that's the whole premise of Mystics and Sceptics. It's a collection that just refuses to pick a side. It's not trying to convince you of anything.
Not at all. It puts these ancient Tibetan hagiographies, stories of yogis flying and performing miracles, right alongside these really gritty modern memoirs of people who went to an ashram looking for enlightenment and, well, found something else entirely.
Yeah, they found power, politics, and ego games. We've got hermits eating nettles until their skin literally turns green. And then on the next page, you've got Silicon Valley icons wandering around India looking for a guru.
It's a wild mix. But that central tension, the one right there in the title, Mystics and Sceptics, we usually see those as complete opposites, right? You're either a believer or you're a rationalist. How do they coexist in this space?
That's the question.
Well, I think you have to look at the environment itself. The Himalayas are called Devbhumi, the land of the gods. It's a sacred space, but it's also a place of incredibly brutal physical reality.
Avalanches, freezing temperatures, isolation.
Exactly. You can't survive there on fantasy alone. You need practical, skeptical, hard-nosed survival skills. But at the same time, the landscape is so overwhelming, so far beyond human scale, that it almost forces a kind of mystical surrender.
So the environment itself creates both the mystic and the skeptic inside of you.
I think so. So the mission of our deep dive today is to see how those two voices, the one that prays and the one that questions, can actually live inside the same people, often at the same time.
And we should be clear, we're going to try to do that without taking sides ourselves.
Yeah.
We aren't here to say magic is real or it's all a delusion.
No, we're just reporting on the experiences as they are written in the text. We're traversing that inner geography. We'll look at karma, reincarnation, and this really fascinating concept called crazy wisdom.
Okay, let's dive in. If we're going to talk about the archetype of the Himalayan master, the absolute figurehead, the rock star of this entire tradition, we have to start with Milarepa.
You have to. Jetson Milarepa, he lived back in the 11th and 12th centuries, and he's this figure who just looms over all of Tibetan Buddhism. But the reason he's so important isn't just that he became this great enlightened saint, it's where he started from.
The classic sinner to saint arc.
It's so much more than just sinner. I mean, the word villain is probably more accurate. Milarepa wasn't some kid who stole an apple. His backstory is a full-blown revenge tragedy. It's Shakespearean.
So can you set the scene for us? What happened?
Well, he was born into a wealthy family, good life, good prospects ahead of him. But his father died when he was young, and his aunt and uncle stepped in to manage the estate.
And I'm guessing manage is in air quotes.
Big hair quotes. It was a move of just classic naked greed. They seized the entire patrimony, everything. They didn't just kick Milarepa, his mother, and his sister out. They've effectively enslaved them. They forced them to work as servants in the very house that used to be theirs.
Wow. That is psychologically just brutal. And his mother, she didn't just accept this.
Oh no, she was consumed by rage. And honestly, who could blame her? She was just burning with this desire for revenge, so she sold the last tiny plot of land she had left to send Milarepa away. Not to learn a trade or poetry.
No, she sent him to learn sorcery.
Yes. She gave him a very specific mandate. She said, learn how to destroy them, or don't bother coming back.
So he basically goes to a dark arts academy.
Essentially. And the thing is, he was a natural. The texts say he mastered the art of creating massive hailstorms to destroy crops, and, more terrifyingly, how to use incantations to collapse buildings.
And he doesn't hesitate to use it.
Not for a second. He comes back to his village, and during a wedding feast for his cousin at his uncle's house, the house that should have been his, he uses his powers. He collapses the roof.
And people died.
35 people died. His cousins, the wedding guests, animals in the stable below. It was a complete massacre.
Okay, so we're starting our spiritual journey with a mass murderer. This is not the typical origin story for a great guru.
And that is the crucial point. That's why his story is so powerful. Because Milarepa gets his revenge, but he feels no satisfaction at all. Instead, he is completely crushed by the weight of what he has done. He understands the law of karma, the law of cause and effect.
Right.
He knows that by causing such immense suffering, he has guaranteed himself a rebirth in the hell realms for eons, and he is utterly terrified.
So his initial motivation for seeking enlightenment isn't some lofty goal like, I want to save all sentient beings. It's, I am terrified and I don't want to go to hell.
It's pure existential panic. It's self-preservation. So he goes searching for a teacher, a guru, who can show him a way out. And he eventually finds Marpa the translator.
Now, Marpa is a legend himself, right? He's the one who made these incredibly dangerous journeys on foot from Tibet to India to bring back the Buddhist teachings.
A true hero of the tradition. But as a teacher, well, let's just say his methods were deeply unorthodox.
Unorthodox is a very polite way of putting it. From reading the source material, if Marpa ran a school today, he'd be imprisoned for abuse.
He probably would be, because Marpa takes one look at Milarepa and refuses to teach him a single word of the Dharma. Instead, he treats him like an animal. He yells at him, he beats him, he works him like a slave. And then comes the really famous part, the ordeal of the towers.
Right, the towers. Can you break this down for us? Because this feels like it's the central metaphor for his entire training.
I think it is. Marpa points to a ridge and says to Milarepa, I want you to build me a stone tower there, by yourself. And Milarepa, who is desperate for the teachings, agrees immediately. He starts hauling these huge stones by hand, mixing the mud, building it up story by story. It takes months.
The book says his back became covered in these horrible open sores from carrying the rocks.
Just raw, bleeding flesh. And when he finally finishes the tower, he goes to Marpa, so proud. And Marpa comes out, takes a look at it, and says, I don't think I told you to build it there. I must have been drunk. Tear it all down and put every single stone back exactly where you found it.
That is, I can't even imagine. It's just devastating.
And then he makes him do it again. On another ridge, build a semicircular tower. Milarepa does it. Marpa says, this is ridiculous. It looks like a yurt. Tear it down. Then a triangular tower. Each time, Milarepa builds it with his bare hands. And each time, Marpa finds some absurd reason to demand its complete destruction.
So I have to play the skeptic here. Is Marpa just a sadist? Is this just a massive, cruel power trip?
That is a natural question for a modern mind to ask. It looks like sadism. But in the context of Vajrayana Buddhist psychology, this is seen as a very sophisticated, if extreme, spiritual technology. It's a process called purification through ordeal.
Okay, so how does that work? How does building and demolishing things purify you?
You have to think about Milarepa's ego. He's not some humble peasant. He's a powerful sorcerer. He can kill people with his mind. He has this immense pride, this huge sense of I am. If Marpa had just given him meditation instructions, Milarepa would have just taken that knowledge and added it to his powerful ego. He would have become an even more dangerous, spiritually inflated demon.
So the towers were designed specifically to break him, to break his pride.
To completely crush him. Marpa had to destroy Milarepa's hope. He had to bring him to a point of total, absolute despair, where he had no pride left, no expectation of any reward, no self left to defend. The text says Milarepa was brought to the brink of suicide several times. And only at that moment, when the vessel was completely empty and cracked open, did Marpa finally say, okay, your negative karma is purified. Now I can teach you.
It's a terrifying pedagogy, but I guess you can't argue with the results. Milarepa eventually becomes the greatest yogi in Tibetan history,
Yeah.
but he doesn't stay in the monastery with Marpa, does he?
No. Once he receives the teachings, he goes to the other extreme. Extreme, solitary asceticism. He retreats into the caves of the high Himalayas. Drakartaso is the most famous one. And he makes a vow not to descend from the mountains until he achieves complete enlightenment.
And this is where the story of the nettles comes in.
Yes. He runs out of the provisions he brought. He has no clothes but a thin cotton robe. He's living in a freezing cave, and the only thing growing nearby are patches of wild, stinging nettles. So he figures out how to make a thin soup out of them, and that becomes his only diet. For years.
I can't even imagine that. What does that do to a human body, just eating nettles?
The descriptions in the source are incredibly vivid. He becomes skeletal, just skin and bones. His hair becomes wild and matted. And because of the high chlorophyll content in the nettles, his skin and hair actually take on a pale, sickly green hue.
So you have this image of a green-skinned skeleton singing in a cave.
Exactly, and the singing is key. He didn't write academic treatises. He composed what are called gur, or songs of realization, spontaneous poems and songs about his experiences. There's one verse that just perfectly captures his state of mind. He sings about his desire to die in complete solitude.
No footprints on the doorstep and no sign of blood inside.
If thus I can die in this mountain retreat, the aims of this yogin will be complete. It's this haunting image. He wants to just dissolve back into the landscape, no trace left behind.
It's the ultimate erasure of the ego.
Right.
But the story of his death, it's not that simple, is it? It brings us right back to that mystic versus skeptic tension. Milarepa doesn't just fade away in his cave. He's murdered.
That's right. He's poisoned by a rival, a learned scholar, a geshe named Sekpua. And this geshe was just consumed by professional jealousy. Milarepa was uneducated, he was green-skinned and weird, and yet everyone adored him and saw him as a great saint. The geshe was a respected scholar, but he had no real followers.
So he bribes a woman to give Milarepa a bowl of poisoned curds. Now, a skeptic hears this and says, okay, a tragic end to a difficult life. Local religious rivalries turned violent. A very human story.
A simple political assassination, basically. But the source material, the hagiography, gives us the mystic's view. It claims that Milarepa, through his clairvoyance, knew the curds were poisoned the moment he saw them.
So then the question is, why did he eat them?
Exactly. And his answer was essentially, my work here is done, my time has come. He ate the poisoned curds voluntarily. And then the text describes this incredible moment of what we can only call crazy wisdom. Milarepa starts exhibiting signs of immense physical pain. But then he says a prayer and transfers the pain to the wooden door of his room.
He put his pain into the door.
Yes. The wood of the door starts creaking and groaning and vibrating with agony, while Milarepa sits there calmly. Then, to teach the jealous geshe a lesson, he transfers the pain from the door to the geshe himself just for a moment. The geshe collapses in screaming agony, realizes the incredible power of the man he just poisoned, and in his final moments becomes Milarepa's disciple.
So even his own murder becomes a teaching tool.
It becomes his final lesson on karma, and it forces you to ask, if you are truly enlightened, is death something that just happens to you, or is it an event you actively participate in? For the mystic, Milarepa wasn't a victim. He was the master of the entire situation, right up to his very last breath.
That's a really powerful image. And it transitions us perfectly, actually.
Yeah.
Because while Milarepa is this very solitary, intensely masculine figure, the lone yogi in the cave, the anthology opens up a completely different side of Himalayan spirituality, this sort of hidden history of the divine feminine.
Yes, and this is such a crucial counter-narrative. We so often picture the Himalayas as a place for monks and patriarchs, this very male world, but the sources introduce us to the Dakini tradition, specifically through the lineage that starts with Yeshe Tsogyal.
And she was an 8th century figure, right? She was the main consort of Padmasambhava, the great master who is credited with bringing Buddhism to Tibet.
Correct. But she wasn't just a consort in the sense of a passive partner or a wife. She was a spiritual genius in her own right. She is the one credited with transcribing Padmasambhava's most profound teachings and then hiding them as terma, or treasure texts, all across the Tibetan landscape.
I love this concept of terma. Can we explain that a bit more? It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It is a bit like that. The idea is that certain teachings are too advanced or perhaps too dangerous for the current generation. So the master hides them, sometimes physically inside a rock or at the bottom of a lake, but sometimes psychically in the mind stream of a future disciple.
So they're like time-release capsules for wisdom.
That's a perfect analogy. And these texts are then discovered or revealed centuries later by a special kind of adept called a terton, a treasure revealer, at the exact historical moment when the world needs that specific teaching.
And Yeshe Tsogyal is the one who hid them. Her own biography, her Namthar, tells her story of striving for enlightenment in a female body, which was not easy.
Not at all. She faces incredible misogyny, she's assaulted, she's doubted at every turn. But Padmasambhava makes this incredibly radical statement for the 8th century. He says that if a woman has true determination, her potential for enlightenment is actually greater than a man's.
Because she has to overcome more obstacles.
Perhaps that's part of it. Or maybe because the female energy, which is associated with wisdom or prajna, is seen as being more naturally aligned with the ultimate goal. But the deep dive here gets really interesting when we leap forward 1,200 years to the modern era. The source introduces us to a woman named Khandro Tar Lamo. She lived from 1938 to 2002.
And she is considered to be an emanation of Yeshe Tsogyal.
Right. And we need to be really clear about what emanation means in this context. In the Tibetan worldview, this isn't just someone saying, oh, I'm inspired by her. It's not even just, I believe I was her in a past life. It's more direct and active than that. She is the living activity of Yeshe Tsogyal manifesting in the world right now to help beings.
Just look at those dates again, 1938 to 2002.
Yeah.
She's living through the absolute worst, most destructive period of modern Tibetan history. The Chinese invasion and the Cultural Revolution.
This is where the mystic worldview collides with the brutal, skeptical reality of 20th century politics. Monasteries were dynamited, ancient texts were burned, monks and nuns were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. And Khandro Tari Lamo did not escape this. As a known spiritual figure, she was a direct target.
There's a specific story in the text that is incredibly difficult to read, but I think we have to share it just to understand the stakes.
I agree. During a public struggle session, communist officials seized her. To torture her, or perhaps to publicly test the rumors of her holiness, they forced her down and placed her bare chest directly onto a red-hot, wood-burning iron stove.
God, that is just horrific.
It is visceral, unimaginable cruelty. But this is where the story splits. The oral tradition, the mystic account, says that she entered a state of deep meditation. She focused on taking upon herself the suffering of all beings trapped in the hot hell realms. And because of that profound state of compassion, the fire did not burn her. When they pulled her away, she bore no marks.
That's the miracle.
That's the miracle story. But the source material does something really important. It gives us the historian's note. It points out that her official biography, which was published much later in China, omits the torture entirely. It omits the years of beatings and starvation she endured in labor camps.
Why would they do that?
Because it focuses only on the safe miracles. Things like her magically multiplying a small bag of rice to feed a whole community, or stopping a rock slide with a gesture. A saint who multiplies rice is a quaint folk hero. A saint who is tortured by the state is a political witness. It's a much more dangerous story to tell.
So for us, as people trying to understand this, the truth is probably a synthesis of the two.
I think it has to be. She was clearly a woman of immense spiritual power who also endured horrific, unimaginable trauma. Whether her skin actually blistered or not, the fact that she survived that hell and didn't become consumed by bitterness or hatred, the fact that she emerged to rebuild her entire community, that, to me, is the real miracle.
And she did rebuild, didn't she, in the 1980s when things loosened up a bit?
Yes. During the Reform and Opening period, she and her husband, who was also a great Lama, began revealing those treasure texts hidden by Yeshe Tsogyal. They literally unlocked the wisdom that had been suppressed for decades. She became a living bridge between the ancient past and the shattered present of modern Tibet.
It's just such a powerful testament to resilience. The inner geography can survive even when the outer physical geography is being completely destroyed.
Precisely.
Okay, speaking of bridges and people who build bridges between worlds, we have to talk about the man who arguably built the biggest bridge between the spiritual Himalayas and the modern West, the Silicon Valley guru.
Neem Karoli Baba, or as his devotees called him, simply Maharaji.
The man in the plaid blanket.
The very same. Now, if Milarepa is the archetype of the hardcore ascetic, Maharaji is the absolute archetype of what we mentioned earlier, crazy wisdom, or in Tibetan, Yeshe Chola.
Right, Yeshe Chola. Can you define that for us a bit more clearly?
Sure, it's the idea that our normal, rational, linear, polite way of behaving is actually a kind of prison. It keeps us locked in our ego, in our social persona. So, a crazy wisdom master acts in a way that is completely spontaneous and unpredictable. They might shout at you, they might throw an apple at your head, they might be incredibly rude one moment and unbelievably loving the next.
And the goal is to short-circuit the disciple's intellect.
Exactly. To shock you out of your mind and into your being, to bypass all your conceptual frameworks.
And Neem Karoli Baba was the absolute master of this. He never gave formal lectures, he didn't write any books, he mostly just sat on a simple wooden bench wrapped in that plaid blanket. And yet, everyone from illiterate villagers to Harvard professors to famous musicians flocked to him.
The origin story of his name is the classic example of his style. It's the train story. He was traveling on a train in British India, sitting in a first-class compartment, but looking like a simple Sadhu. A British ticket collector comes in, sees this, half-naked holy man, and demands a ticket.
Which, of course, he doesn't have.
Of course not. So the conductor gets angry and has him thrown off the train at a small, dusty, middle-of-nowhere village called Neem Karoli. "Get off my train," he says.
And the Baba just sits down under a tree by the tracks.
He just sits down calmly. The conductor blows the whistle, the driver engages the steam engine, and nothing happens. The train will not move.
Okay, hold on. I have to be the skeptic again here. This is a mechanical steam engine. It's pistons, it's pressure, it's gears. Are we really saying that a man sitting under a tree exerted some kind of psychic force on tons of steel? Or is this more like a story of mass hysteria?
And that is the absolute collision point of this entire book. The skeptic in you says, maybe the Indian driver was superstitious. Maybe he saw a holy man get kicked off and he subtly sabotaged the engine. Or maybe the other staff went on a kind of silent strike out of respect.
A kind of social magic rather than a violation of physics.
Perhaps. But the story, as it's told, is that the British officials checked everything. The machine was in perfect working order. The train just would not move an inch. Eventually, the other Indian passengers went to the officials and said, "Look, you kicked off a saint. The train won't move until you apologize and ask him to get back on."
So desperate they do it.
They do. They go to the tree, they apologize profusely, and they beg him to reboard. And he actually negotiates with them. He says, "I'll get on, but only if you promise to build a proper station for this little village, and if you promise to treat sadhus with more respect from now on." They agree to everything. He steps back onto the train, and immediately, without any mechanical repair, it lurches forward and continues on its journey.
And from that day on, he is known as Neem Karoli Baba, the Baba from the village of Neem Karoli.
Exactly. But what's so fascinating to me is how this very specific, chaotic, Indian-style magical energy translated so powerfully to the Western mind. You mentioned Silicon Valley. We're talking about people like Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and maybe the most famous story, Larry Brilliant.
Larry Brilliant's story is my favorite because it's so frustrating. He's this young, idealistic hippie doctor. He goes to the Himalayas. He wants the full Milarepa experience. He wants to meditate in the cave and have visions.
It's the spiritual fantasy, right? But he gets to Maharaji, and the guru just keeps shouting at him, "Go to Delhi, go to the World Health Organization, go work on smallpox."
Which is the absolute last thing a hippie doctor wants to hear. Go get a bureaucratic government job and push paper. It's the antithesis of the spiritual quest.
Exactly. And Larry resists. He drags his feet. He finally takes the grueling, hot, dusty bus journey to Delhi. He goes to the WHO office and they reject him. They say, "Sorry, we don't have a job for you." So he comes all the way back to the ashram thinking, "Okay, great. I tried. Now you'll let me meditate." And Maharaji just screams at him, "Go back."
This is his version of the Stone Towers.
It is. That is the perfect connection. Just as Marpa made Milarepa haul stones to break his pride and his ego, Maharaji made Larry Brilliant ride buses and face bureaucratic rejection to break his attachment to what he thought a spiritual life should look like. He was forcing him to become useful instead of just being spiritual.
And the punchline to the story is just incredible. Larry Brilliant eventually gets the job. He becomes a key leader in the international campaign that actually eradicates smallpox from India and eventually the world.
So the crazy wisdom wasn't crazy at all. It was deeply, profoundly prescient. The real miracle wasn't stopping a train for an hour. The real miracle was saving millions of children from a horrific disease. It completely reframes the whole concept of a guru. The guru isn't there to make you feel good or give you pleasant experiences. The guru is there to put you where you are most needed in the world.
I love that. But we have to acknowledge the other side here. The editor of the book, Namita Gokhale, she says she's a skeptic, but that she finds mysteries best left alone. regarding Maharaji, even calling him a quantum saint who could be in two places at once. But she also includes accounts that show the dark mirror of this whole guru culture.
Yes, and any honest look at this world has to include that dark mirror. Because for every Neem Karoli Baba who inspires someone to eradicate smallpox, there are a lot of ashrams that just, well, you just take your money and break your heart. If you go looking for magic, you become very easy to manipulate.
Which brings us to the account in the book by Bhushita Vasista. She writes about her time in the Osho commune in Kathmandu.
This is a very different vibe. This is the skeptic's journey in its purest form.
She describes the initial appeal so perfectly. You're young, you're an intellectual, you feel like the material world is boring and meaningless. You're searching for what she calls the undefined more.
And the commune sells you that dream. It promises freedom, enlightenment, a community of special, chosen people. But Vasista's account is this slow, painful chronicle of disillusionment. It's not one big dramatic event. It's the gradual realization of the hidden hierarchy.
It's just high school, but with orange robes and meditation.
It is. She starts to see the power plays, the inner circles, the guru's favorites, the sexual politics, the manipulation, and the source describes the specific pain of what she calls the breaking of the illusion of God. When you realize the person you worshipped as a divine being is just a person, and maybe a deeply flawed, narcissistic person, it is devastating. It's a spiritual heartbreak that can be much worse than any romantic breakup.
But her story doesn't end in pure cynicism, which is what I really appreciated about it. She doesn't just throw up her hands and say, spirituality is all fake.
No, she doesn't. She writes about this crucial shift from worshiping a person to submitting to life itself. She finds the sacred not in a guru's decree, but in the valleys, in the rustle of the wind through the trees, in the ordinary, unadorned reality of the mountains. It's a profound maturation. She moves from the magic phase to the real phase of her journey.
That idea of maturation is echoed by another writer in the book, Madhu Tandon. She was at a different, much more austere ashram called Murtola with a teacher named Sri Madhavashish, or Shista, and she shares a concept that I think every single one of our listeners needs to hear, the distinction between luggage and impedimenta.
Oh, this is a brilliant distinction. Her guru, Ashishta, told her, you can reduce your outer luggage quite easily. You know, you can sell your house, give away all your nice clothes, go live in a simple hut. That's the easy luggage to drop. But it means absolutely nothing if you don't reduce the impedimenta.
Impedimenta, it's a Latin military term, isn't it, from the Roman legions?
That's right. It refers to the heavy baggage, the non-essential equipment that slows down an army's march. And in the spiritual context, it means your mental clutter, your anxieties, your need for approval, your cherished prejudices, your fixed ideas about who you are, all that internal noise.
So you could be a monk living in a cave wearing nothing but a loincloth, but if your head is still full of all that impedimenta, you're still carrying a crushing load.
You're just a stressed out person in a loincloth. That's it. Madhu Tandon's insight is that the true guru-disciple relationship isn't about the guru adding new spiritual ideas to your collection. It's about using the relationship as a mirror to help you see and unpack your own impedimenta. The goal isn't blind obedience, it's radical self-observation.
So the mountains, the ashram, the guru, they all act as a kind of clarifier.
Or a pressure cooker. They bring all your hidden stuff to the surface so you're forced to deal with it.
Which leads us perfectly to the stage itself. We've talked about the actors, the saints, the skeptics, the seekers, but we need to talk about the theater they're performing in, the landscape itself, and not the pretty, National Geographic postcard version.
No. For this, we're looking at Vaibhav Kaul's essay, Terrains of Transcendence, and he takes us to the really high-altitude plateaus and deserts, places like Thangu and Sikkim and the Lahore Himalaya. This is rugged, hostile, almost alien terrain.
And Kaul introduces a term that just sent a shiver down my spine when I read it, the theology of disaster.
It sounds ominous, doesn't it? But it's a window into the local worldview. In the modern West, if there's a huge flood or an earthquake, we call it a natural disaster. It's random, it's meaningless, it's a tragedy. We send aid, we try to fix it with engineering. But Kaul explains that the locals view the mountains themselves, like the Great Peak Kangchenjunga, as living, sentient, and often wrathful deities.
So a landslide isn't just a geological event, it's a reaction.
It's what he calls a geocatharsis.
Geocatharsis. Okay, break that down for us.
Well, catharsis means a purging or a cleansing of powerful repressed emotions. The local belief is that human actions, our greed, our pollution, our collective heavy karma, don't just dissipate. They accumulate. They build up like a physical weight in the land itself. When that negative weight gets to be too much, the mountain deity shakes it off. The earthquake, the flash flood, the avalanche, that is the deity purging the bad karma from the landscape.
That changes absolutely everything about how you would live in a place like that. You aren't just managing geological risk.
Yeah.
You are in a constant dynamic relationship with a god who might kill you if you and your community misbehave.
Precisely. And Call notes this fascinating, almost unsettling lack of fear regarding death among some of the locals. To die at the hands of a wrathful deity, meaning to be killed in a flood or landslide, is seen by some not as a tragic end, but as a powerfully transformative, even liberating experience. It's a glimpse of the truth.
It's terrifying, but there's also an odd kind of beauty in it. It gives meaning to what we would see as meaningless tragedy.
And Call doesn't just report on this. He experiences a version of it himself. He describes a moment when he's practicing these advanced yogic breathing techniques, what they call cultivating lung or wind energy, near the edge of a massive waterfall. And he enters the state he calls divine senselessness.
He's standing right on the precipice, right?
Right on the edge. And he feels this overwhelming urge to just step off. Not out of depression. It's not suicidal. It's a feeling of ecstatic union. He feels the boundary between his own inner geography and the outer geography of the waterfall completely dissolve. In that moment, he realizes the mountain isn't just a rock, it's a mirror for the mind's most extreme and transcendent states.
It really drives home the point that a deep dive into this kind of Himalayan spirituality isn't safe or cozy. Real spirituality involves immense risk. It involves the dismantling of the self, and from the outside, that can look like madness, or it can look like wanting to jump off a waterfall.
Which brings us to the curiosities. The anthology is just filled with these amazing little fragments and short stories that just make you stop and say, wait, what? Is that even possible?
This is the Other Voices section, and the first one I want to talk about is the trance runners.
The Lungampa. This is the stuff of legend. The explorer Alexander David Neal wrote about seeing them in the early 20th century. These are monks who train in strict seclusion, sometimes in total darkness for years, to master their internal wind energy, their lung.
And the result is that they can run for days and nights on end without stopping.
It's described as something more than just running. They enter a deep trance state, and they move with this supernatural speed and lightness, as if they're bounding or gliding, their feet barely seeming to touch the ground. They can cover vast distances across the Tibetan plateau.
And the crucial rule is, you must never, ever interrupt them.
Never. The technique requires them to keep their gaze fixed on a distant object, like a specific star or a mountain peak. If you break their concentration, if you try to talk to them or get in their way, the shock of snapping back into ordinary reality could, the stories say, actually kill them on the spot.
That is such a perfect metaphor for the entire spiritual path. Keep your eyes fixed on the distant star. Don't let the distractions of the world break your concentration, or the whole project collapses.
It really is.
I also have to mention the story of the heavy blanket. This one made me laugh, but it's also incredibly deep.
The story of Gudari Baba. The writer, Swami Rama, meets this very eccentric sage in the Valley of Flowers, and this Gudari Baba wears a blanket, a gudari, made of 1,000 different passes of cloth sewn together, and it weighs between 80 and 100 pounds.
Why on earth? That sounds like a form of self-torture.
Well, a Japanese Zen monk who is traveling with them asks that exact same question. He mocks the Baba. Why are you carrying that useless heavy weight around? It's the voice of the skeptic again, the voice of logic and efficiency confronting mystery.
And then, conveniently, the skeptic gets sick.
He comes down with a terrible case of malaria, a high fever, shivering uncontrollably in the cold mountain air. And Gudari Baba, with this little twinkle in his eye, comes over and throws the 100-pound heavy blanket on top of him.
His living blanket.
He calls it his living blanket, and the crushing weight of it pins the monk down, generates this immense heat, and according to Swami Rama's story, it breaks the fever, it cures the malaria. And it's this perfect, humorous lesson. Don't be so quick to judge the madman's methods. His burden might turn out to be your cure.
And finally, a very brief encounter with Lal Baba, the red-skinned sadhu.
Yes, this is from the artist Siddharth's account. He's trekking and comes across this sadhu who is painted entirely bright red, has wild matted hair, and looks absolutely terrifying, a vision from another world. But when this wild figure speaks, he gives the simplest, most profound advice in the whole book.
To be as natural as nature itself is the golden rule.
To be as natural as nature itself. That's it. And it just cuts through everything else. It cuts through the complex rituals, the building of towers, the poisoned curds, the torture, the ashram politics. It just says, align yourself with the fundamental rhythm of the place you are in. Be like the river. Be like the wind. Be still like the stone.
So after all this, we've been on quite a journey. We've seen Milarepa building his towers, Yeshit Sogyal hiding treasures for the future, Neem Karoli Baba stopping trains, and people getting their hearts completely broken in communes. What does it all add up to? What's the synthesis here?
I think the answer is right there in the title, Mystics and Sceptics. The ultimate message of the Himalayas, as presented in this book, isn't that you have to choose one or the other. It's that you have to learn to hold both perspectives at the same time.
How do you mean?
Well, the mystic sees the potential for meaning in everything. The poison is a final lesson, the train stopping is a miracle, the disastrous flood is a cosmic purging. The mystic lives in a world that is alive and communicating with them constantly.
And the skeptic?
The skeptic keeps you honest. The skeptic is the one who reminds you that the guru is a human being with flaws, that the commune has a power structure, that the mountain is physically dangerous, not just metaphorically profound. The skeptic is what prevents crazy wisdom from just becoming plain crazy.
You need the anchor of the skeptic and the sail of the mystic.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The source material tells us again and again that the Himalayas act as a catalyst. They just accelerate whatever process is already happening inside you. If you go there seeking power, you will find it, and it might very well destroy you. If you go there seeking truth, you will find it, but it might strip you of everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world.
It accelerates the internal process. I think that's the key takeaway.
And you have to remember that warning from the very beginning. You don't know if the person you're meeting is a saint or a charlatan. And maybe, in the end, the only way to really tell the difference is by looking at your own reaction. Is your ego reacting, or is some deeper part of you reacting? That's the real test.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to mull over them. We've talked a lot today about this idea of inner geography. We've said that the mountains are, in many ways, a state of mind.
Yes.
So here's the provocation. If the mountains are just a mirror for what's inside you, what happens when you leave them? Can you carry the deep dive of the Himalayas in a crowded city? Can you find your cave of nettles in a high-rise apartment building? Or is the physical geography, the place itself, absolutely essential to the experience?
That is the ultimate question for any modern seeker, isn't it? Is the magic in the rock, or is the rock just the trigger for the magic that was already inside you?
So I challenge everyone listening. Find your own Murtoli, your own Thangu, right where you are today. Find the thing in your life that challenges you, that scares you just a little bit, and see if you can find the naturalness inside it.
And maybe watch out for the heavy blankets.
Always watch out for the heavy blankets. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.